You're listening to Next Pitch, the student athlete playbook for parents raising tomorrow's athletes.
Hi, my name's Anthony Leverts. I'm the host of the Next Pitch podcast. Along with my partner, Jason Cardona, we are bringing you a series on a playbook for student athletes, parents, coaches, anybody supporting student athletes, and really excited about today's guest. Here with Hannah Huesman, mental performance coach. I think I got that right. Also a business owner, has a remarkable story of kind of her journey through athletics into the business world and kind of what she's doing now. And Hannah, thank you. And I should say, most importantly, mom of a new baby that's taking a nap that may join us at some point in time in this conversation. Thank you so much for being a part of our show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk all the things today.
So for people who don't know you,
Mm-hmm.
kind of give me your elevator pitch of who you are, like what you do now, your background, education, anything you think I should know about you that that our audience is gonna find. Introduce us to you.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Like you said, my name is Hannah Huesman. I am originally from Nashville, Tennessee. I went to college and actually played softball and basketball at the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga. And then from there, I went and got my master's degree in sport and performance psychology from the University of Tennessee. And from there, I went and worked with MLB in Major League Baseball for 7 years. And then I ended up starting my own private practice about a year ago, a little over, and it's called Mental Sweat. And that's what I do. And I do have a 6-month-old baby. So I am working on balancing full-time stay-at-home mom and full-time full working mom. So that's where I'm at. And it's going great so far. And I work with elite level athletes. I work with business people. I work with youth athletes. I work with all types of humans because I think mental performance and everything that it has to offer can impact anyone and everyone. So you don't just have to be the MVP of the league. You can be anyone and everyone. And I think the conversation we'll have today will benefit you. So yeah, I'm a mental performance coach and a mom and love everything that I get to do all day, every day.
That's cool. I'm hoping that this through osmosis of this conversation that I get some good detail out of this for myself in my life. I want to start with the mom part.
Yeah.
So you have a baby, right? Well, first of all, you have an amazing career that you've built, right? And then you start a company and you're out on your own, and having done that myself, that's hard work and can be all consuming, as well as also being a parent is, especially of a baby, is all consuming. Mm-hmm. How do you manage that workload? How do you manage that thought process of not driving yourself crazy or maybe you do drive yourself crazy. I'm not doing enough on my business. I'm not doing enough as a mom. How do you manage that for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of hit it, right? Some days I'm feel like I'm falling short on everything. Some days I feel like I'm mastering all of it. So it ebbs and flows. But I learned this a long time ago in my very first internship. I actually asked one of my mentors. He was a male, so he wasn't a mom, so it was a little different. But he still had a kid, and was trying to balance. And he's like, the best piece of advice I ever heard was, wherever you're at, be fully there. And so, right now, technically I'm in work mode and my baby's upstairs asleep, but I'm fully in work mode right now. Right. And then when baby's up, I'm fully in mom mode. And so I feel like there's always going to be some factors of guilt on I should be doing this more, should be doing that more. But I know I'm my best version of myself, regardless of what I'm doing, if I'm being a mental performance coach or if I'm being a mom and if I'm fully in that moment. And so for me, it's wherever I am, that's where I am. And if I plan my day accordingly, right? If I'm okay, I know she sleeps here. I know I work here. I know we'll have help here. I know I'll do, then the priorities are set. And so that way, when I'm doing things, I know why I'm doing them and I'm fully in it. Like today, I know I had to do this and I want to do this. And so I'm not worried about the other things because this is part of my schedule and part of the routine. So it's kind of like if you set yourself up for success, the guilt goes down a little bit. And then if you can fully accept and be in the moment that you're in, I think that's how you really, and you can still be really, really good at what you're doing instead of feeling torn in between. So whatever mode I'm in, I'm fully in that mode and let go of the other mode temporarily. And then we flip and then we flip. And sometimes it flips back and forth like 12 times a day.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's only a mom for the day, right? I don't do any work. Like I really protect that time. And sometimes I'm traveling and on the road and like basically only working that day. And so it ebbs and flows. And as the saying goes, give yourself so much grace. If there's any saying I've heard in parenthood, it's give yourself grace. So I just try to keep coming back to that too.
Yeah, I had a really smart guy that I worked for at one point in time. He told me to live where my feet are.
Yeah.
And wherever but then, as you said, the ability to plan your day, plan your week, plan your month, plan your year so that you can live where your feet are and all the things that are dragging you away from that. If you haven't planned that accordingly, it's hard to do. All right. So Hannah's a little kid. Okay. At some point in time, you decide to get involved in athletics. So how old were you when sports got introduced into your life? And what were you one that like immediately like, okay,
Yeah.
this is my jam? Or were you like my wife when she first started, who ended up being a Pac-10 basketball player? When she first started playing, she was picking flowers out in the field, in the soccer field, right?
Yeah.
Kind of a long journey from picking flowers to playing in the Pac-10. For you, what was sort of the introduction and when did you come to love it and know it was something you wanted to do?
Yeah. Well, my first word was ball. So yeah, that's a dead giveaway. Yeah, well, I played my whole life. My parents got me into sports from a super young age. Even I think at age 2, they threw me into gymnastics. My claim to all my speed and flexibility and core strength is from I think 8 years of gymnastics when I was little. And then I had a younger brother who's less than 2 years younger than me. So we grew up competing, fighting tooth and nail 24/7. So sport has always been a huge part of who I am and who my family was. My parents played in high school. They didn't play in the college level, but they were our coaches and were always around. And, mom would go to one and dad would go to the other with me and my brother. And so it's kind of all I've known. And then, as it progressed, it became, okay, which ones are you taking seriously, right? I mean, I ran the gamut. I did gymnastics, cheerleading. I did cross country, volleyball, track, basketball, softball. I'm sure there's more I'm missing, but it was like, pick which one are you the best at? And so I chose softball and basketball. And actually,
How old were you when you made that choice?
High school.
In high school.
Yeah. So I think I even cheered in 8th grade, ran cross country in 8th grade. So I was still doing a lot of that in middle school. And then in high school, it was basketball and softball. And then I was playing AAU basketball and travel softball, which I don't necessarily recommend. But my personal story, I had a really hard time choosing. I literally couldn't choose. I think physically I was more gifted in softball, but I loved the challenge of basketball. And so I was like convinced my parents to keep doing as much of both as I possibly could. And then ended up before I went into my senior year, I was like, okay, I'm gonna pursue basketball in college at first, or I didn't know it was at first, but pursue basketball. And I still played school, like high school softball. I didn't play travel softball my senior year, or going into my senior year. And so I chose basketball, and then that's how I ended up at UTC playing basketball my freshman year.
So we're going to get to that. I want to go back, just rewind a little bit back to the youth sports. And obviously, there's this big push from club sports in our country because of the money that's involved in it to specialize.
Yep.
And we want our 3rd graders to be a specialized volleyball, basketball, soccer player and not be involved in anything else. From your experience, both as a young athlete and now with what you do for a living, how do you feel about being multi-sport athlete and how important that is for young people as they're going through that, what am I going to be when I grow up type of thought process, both for parents and for the athlete?
Yeah. And I'll answer that from a mental perspective, right?
Yeah,
I think that's appropriate.
Yeah.
I think the main objective for kids in playing should be to have as much fun as possible. And I was actually thinking about this after our conversation the other day. I was thinking about, why is it so important for youth sports to be fun? right? And on one hand, it's like, because they're not even fully developed yet. Okay. We're trying to get them to learn skills from a physical and mental standpoint where their brains aren't even developed to process, to know how to do it. Right. And we're trying to expedite that process, whatever, that's fine. But if we can teach them the core of this to be fun, and we can instill so much joy in their lives from a young age, as they continue to grow, and let's be honest, as the joy kind of gets pulled out, right? The higher you go in sport, the more the joy is pulled out. Like, very rarely do you talk to like an elite level college athlete or a professional athlete and they're like, this is the most fun I've ever had in my whole entire life today, right? No, it's repetitive, it's Groundhog Day, it's a grind, it becomes work, which aren't bad things. It's just not relaxing, super fun, enjoyable. But I think if you build that enough when they're young, it's instilled in them. And even when they reach the highest level, there's still that foundational pieces of, man, I love this sport, right? Or like, this deep down, this brings me so much joy. Maybe it's not the number one or the number 5 reason I play, but deep down, it's still there. And I think that's why it's so important to create fun. And I think that's what my parents did. Now, don't get me wrong, we had the tough car rides home and all that, right or wrong. Like, I think it built character, and like, I think it made me to who I am today. But I think when you play multiple sports, one, you build incredible relationships with people, right? You learn all these different things about friendships and teammates and how to handle different coaches and get different experiences. But from a mental standpoint, like, it's fun, all right? There's not a ton of pressure. And maybe there's one where you're really good at and it starts to get serious, but you still play another one that's kind of still definitely just for fun. Like, maybe it's not your main sport, but you love the team camaraderie, you love that. And it just brings so much joy. So from a mental standpoint, I mean, the more you can get them into, the better, as far as like different sports. But letting them go wherever they want to go, let them do what they want to do, right? And you have plenty of time for it to get very serious, I promise. And it will get serious. And when it does get serious, you're gonna wish it was still fun for them. Like, it's like, so it's a really fine line of when that changes. And I don't know that there's a hard time. I mean, if you can keep it fun for as long as possible, my goodness, keep it fun, right? But it's tough. It's tough.
I want to drill down on that a little bit, because I think what we're talking about is so important for parents and coaches. So youth sports is about having fun with a ball, in the pool, whatever you're doing, right? So
Yeah.
for coaches, and I'd love your opinion on this.
Yeah.
When I talk to young coaches, yeah, you have to teach and there has to be some correction, but there needs to be a segment of your practice plan that's fun. This is just our fun 15 minutes. We're going to play a game. And one of the things I would do with my teams in college is, on like the worst days when they thought it was going to be a horrible day, they'd come in and they think, oh my God, coach is going to be all over us. We'd play badminton, or we'd play pickleball, or we'd play wiffle ball or something, and not practice, right? Just completely shift that. And so having that fun component built into your plan as a youth sport. And then second, something you just said that resonates so deeply with me is the thing with parents. That car ride home after games is one of the places where the fun goes away for the kid. And one of the things that we talk about a lot with coaches with parents is, don't talk to your kids after the game for at least 1 hour. Tell them that you love them and you love watching them play, and leave it at that for an hour. And that adrenaline starts to wear off, that time, the emotions go away. And then those conversations are a little bit easier to have and not as strained. And it's not game's over and the kid's like, oh my God, my parents are going to be all over me. So, and study after study shows that kids want to hear, I love you, I love watching you play. I'd love your thoughts on sort of the fun a little bit more, and on that parent-child relationship directly after games.
Yeah. So one thought on the fun. So I've worked with 3 different professional baseball teams and 1 professional hockey team. And I'll never forget, one time I had a player come up to me and say, because I do sessions, right? I do group sessions too. So a lot of my work is individual based, but a lot of it's group work too. And he came up, he's like, please tell me there's something fun in your meeting. I swear. And I was like, as a matter of fact, there is. And I had a plan, but I was like, I got to up the ante on this.
Yeah,
because it was like, every meeting is just so serious. And not that it's a Debbie Downer, but it's usually around things we can get better on. Right. And like, they know that's what they signed up for sure. But they're like, come on, let's have some fun. And so every single session I start with, for the most part, unless it's extreme situations, there's some kind of game at the beginning. And it, of course, has a tie to whatever the message. This is with grown-ass men. right?
Yeah.
Grown ass men. And I'm still doing some kind of, because I'm a firm believer too. If they laugh, if their guards go down, one, they're going to pay more attention, and two, they're going to remember more.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I'm a grown ass man and I like having fun. So yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, and there's a time, and I don't want that to get misconstrued as like, oh, they just joke around. And I've actually had that happen before. One time on one of the teams I was working with, somebody was walking in, and one of the higher ups, let's just leave it vague, was walking in, and we were joking walking into my meeting, right? We were joking because I want them to feel loose and comfortable when they're talking to me. I don't want it to be this like, what's wrong and like all this stuff. It's like, if the more comfortable you are with me, the more open you're going to be. So my number one objective is for you to be 100% yourself. I'm not going to judge you on anything you do. I'm going to challenge you on things that you do, but no judgment. So he's laughing, walking into the office. We have a great session. And as we're leaving, we tell a joke, something, and he's laughing going out. And that same higher up was walking by. And so the higher up was like, is all we do is joke around here? And in my head, I was like, oh no, that's such a bad look. But then I was like, if that's all you see, then sure, great. And also, like, I want people to know that I give off a good vibe and that they can come talk to me. And when that door's shut, shit gets real, right? It gets really serious and we have deep conversations. But this element of, it's like a fun sandwich. And I've talked about this before. Instead of like compliment, something hard, compliment, it's like laughing, something serious, laughing. And that's one of my philosophies, and it works really well for me. But that's a piece of it. So you kind of have the fun before and after, and then you have the fun before. So again, even with grown people, right, we're still making it fun. So that's the first thing. Let's
put a pin in that right there.
Yeah,
we need to take a break, but I think the point is, and back to the sports piece, and I think your mental performance is so right on. With kids, if they're having fun, they're going to perform better anyway. 100%. So figuring out how to make that fun and loose and enjoyable, I think that'll be fun. When we come back, we're going to talk about the parent-child relationship, and then we're going to dive into your experience in college and the fun and maybe not so fun and what that's like and your experience through that. We'll be right back after a quick break. Welcome back. This is the Next Pitch podcast. We are here with Hannah Huesman, and just had, just kind of put a pin in our last conversation about fun and parenting. And I want to dive into that parent-child relationship in youth sports. So much damage happens between parent and kid right after the game. From my experience, I had kids come play for me who were, going to be professional athletes that had forgotten that the game was fun. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that they hated their parents because of the dynamic that was created after games. And we would always tell them, tell your kids you love watching them play and you love watching and you love them, because that's what studies tell us kids want to hear. From a mental performance side of this, how do you think about that from your chair?
Yeah. So the first thing is be consistent. So I think the reason car rides are so harsh and a intense memory for a lot of kids, even me, like my brother and I, we have the memories and we laugh about it now, but it's usually because the conversation changes depending on how the performance went. Yeah. So the performance was really good. It was like upbeat. There's music playing, like we're laughing, we're talking about the home run we hit, whatever it is. Whereas when performance was bad, maybe there's no music playing. Maybe it's silent, right? Maybe nothing's even said, right? Maybe you do get your tail chewed out. Maybe you're like, what happened? I don't know, right? But the vibe and the consistency is totally off. And so to me, and I love the 1 hour delayed rule. I haven't really heard that. I think that's great. That's one way. If that doesn't work for you, another way is be consistent. So like come up with your significant other, or even with your kid if you want to get them involved. I think there's more power to that before the first game of the season even starts. Hey, sometimes there might be hard conversations that we have to have post game, right? Sometimes we know we're going to play really good some games, and we know we're going to play really bad some games, and that just happens, right? Ebbs and flows, right? Let's make it the norm, not the abnorm, right? And so with that, what should we talk about post game? Like, what do we want that conversation to look like? And if it's like, hey, what's the best thing you did on the field today? Hey, what's the worst thing you did on the court today? And what's one thing you're proud of? Or what's one thing you want to work on tomorrow, right? And no matter what, like whatever your framework is, I don't really care. It doesn't matter, but make it consistent. After the best game of their life, hey, what'd you do well today? What's one thing you could work on? Worst game of life, hey, what'd you do well today? What's one thing you could work on? And maybe you play the same song. I don't know, but the The disconnect comes when the emotion is tied to the outcome, right?
Yeah.
Instead of just like, hey, regardless of what happened, we're still going to like talk shop about the game. And so if we talk shop about the game and you're mad one day, but we ask the same questions, then it's a whole lot easier to handle and be like, well, I knew you would ask that whether I played really well or really bad today. It's not you're only asking me that because I didn't play good, right? So be consistent is number one. And then the second thing, which is super easy, is when you are giving them a pat on the back, when you're saying good job, make sure you're saying that to the things that they actually have control over, right? So don't always just say, hey, nice 3 out there. Hey, nice steal. Instead say, hey, that hustle on that steal was unbelievable. Hey, that hustle on that offensive board was unbelievable, right? That, hey, I saw you, I know you struck out that one time, but when you came back and battled, like at least you had a 9-pitch strikeout. It's like things that they can control instead of, hey, nice home run, or hey, nice buzzer beater, or hey, nice, right, outcome based. Give them props on the things that are inside their control, because you're reinforcing, oh, mom, oh, dad, they care about my effort, my attitude, my resiliency, right? That's instilling mental toughness without having a, you need to be more mentally tough conversation, right? It's planting seeds before they even know what the tree is, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And you talked about the outcome, and I think we get so caught up in the outcome versus the process, right? And that's a game, and it's people make mistakes in every single game they play. And I love the routine. There's a consistency with what you talk about. You have a routine and a plan for everything, right? So if a parent has a plan and I think coaches the same way, you shouldn't have a long post-game talk after you get blown out by 30 and say, nice game, and let's see you on Monday at practice if you won at the buzzer, right? Like having a plan for what you're going to do, and that same routine. And I tell parents all the time, it's very similar to what you said. If you're going to go have ice cream or pizza after the game, do that after you win and after you lose, so that the kid doesn't realize that they get ice cream if they won and they don't get ice cream if they lose, because that becomes, oh no, my outcome wasn't what it was supposed to be, and my reward is based on whether I win or lose. So that process versus outcome, critical in that process of getting kids to have a great time in their sport.
Yeah, 100%. And it's funny you say that, because even in college, right, after a good game, we'd have a little bit higher of a dollar amount we could spend. And then I literally remember after a bad game, we went to McDonald's one day post game. Like it was literally, and so it doesn't matter what level, right? It's so important to have the same consistency. And back to, I didn't want to forget this point. If you're a coach and you're having post-game meetings, I think we do this all the time too. When it's bad, we berate them, right? We get into them, we figure things out. And when it's good, we're like, chalk it up, see you tomorrow. Don't forget, there's just as much, if not more, to take away from the good games as there was the bad games. And I think that's a huge disconnect in our world. Like, good game, see ya, hold on. If we're dissecting the bad and we want to change everything we did from this game, with the good game, why aren't we dissecting this and then saying repeat? How do we redo this, right? And not just hope we like show up and do it again, but we don't spend enough time like dissecting the good either, which I don't know why, like, because we want to get better here. We'll just repeat it, but repeating something is really hard too. So spending I don't think in any world could you convince me that it's not important to have consistent messaging post game in any capacity, from a parent standpoint, coach standpoint, teammate standpoint. I mean, there's no way, like, nothing bad can come out of that. Unless every post game you're having a 30-minute meeting, right? And it's too long, like maybe that's it, but like short and sweet, no.
So I was not going to talk about this, but this just popped up. So with coaches, the enforcing the good is so critical. And because that's the behavior you want. And if all they see, and I'm now talking about film sessions, right? And where you get beyond, 7th, 8th grade, get into high school, get into college, film sessions become such a scary place for kids if they don't have the ability to deliver that film in a very teaching and comfortable environment. And one of the things that I truly believed as a coach was that you start every film session similar to after a game. You start every film session with 10 clips that were great plays, that sets the tone, whether you won or lost. You set the tone for, this is what we did really well, and we need to enhance that. And now here's 2 or 3 clips of where we could have done better. And I think if you can focus on that, what you're talking about, of that messaging being positive most of the time before you deliver the negative, there's a really, really positive learning environment that can come from that.
Yeah, I think that's an unbelievable challenge. I'm thinking back to our film sessions, and it was not that. It was lopsided, but not in the positive way.
Yeah.
But even if it's like, okay, every game, I'm gonna wind it down to 10 things we did really, 10 clips where we nailed it, and 10 clips where we need to get better. Like, even if it's 50-50,
Yeah.
I think that's advantageous, right?
Yeah.
And that way, one, we're not in a film session where they found 57 things we did bad. Great, we knew this was a bad game, right? Or even like, okay, we did 3 things well to 50. Like, I think if it can be even every single time, that's again, like, unparalleled, right? Like, because I know
You're going to get better too.
Yeah,
They're
I'm
going to
probably
get
gonna
better.
called out
Yeah.
for this, but maybe I have a good session and a bad session. Okay, right? Like, and it just makes it the norm that regardless of win or loss, there's always going to be things we did well, and there's always going to be things we can improve on, no matter what.
Well, I just, the piggyback on this just for coaches, and this is not where I thought this was going to go, but the idea that there's times where you need to be negative, right? But if you're that way all the time, and by negative, I mean critical. I don't mean negative. I mean, you need to correct mistakes. But if all you ever do is correct and all you ever are is negative, you're going to get tuned out and you're not going to get better. And so making sure that there is an environment for the young person when they walk in of, oh God, I can't wait for film today. I'm going to have this is an opportunity, just like when I'm out on the court and I'm doing individual workouts, or I'm on the field doing, my skill development. This is an opportunity for me to develop. If coaches hear this and they take anything away from what I'm saying, that is how you have to go about it.
Yeah. And my philosophy on this, and I've talked about this a million times, is that it's a balance with a coach, right? On one hand, you have the coach who's empowering, and on the other hand, you have the coach who's like really like holds you accountable, right?
Yep.
Empowering and accountability. But if you're too much of either, like, think about the coach who all you do is empower people.
Yep.
Like, oh, you're the cheerleader, you're the best friend. But it's like, usually players aren't playing to have another friend as their coach, right? So if they need something, they're probably not going to come to you because you're going to be like, oh, you're great, right? Other side of the spectrum, right? If all you do is challenge them, right? Every time you see them, you're challenging them. Then they're going to see you in the hallway and they're going to turn around. They're going to see you and be like, oh, like, I don't even want to make eye contact, right? Because no matter what I do, it's never good enough, right? Neither one of those are where we want to be, right? We want to be some combination. Now, here's the tricky part. Some players want more challenge. Some players want more empowerment. And it's up to you as a coach to understand which like skewed way does each player need. But it's usually some beautiful combination of knowing when to empower and knowing when to challenge. And it's never 100 or 0 or 100 and 0. If we're trying to get the most out of our athletes.
Yeah. And it's hard. I'm saying these things. It's easy to talk about doing, but it takes that planning and that having a philosophy that this is how you're going to approach your team and your kids. All right.
That's mental performance in a nutshell.
Oh, I love it. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. We're going to dive into your college career and kind of how you got to where you are today. More with Hannah Huesman right after this. Welcome back to the Next Pitch podcast. I'm Anthony Leverett, your host. I am here with mental performance coach Hannah Huesman, and we are having an amazing conversation today. I am learning a lot, and I'm fired up to. I haven't coached in a while. I'm fired up to get back in the gym. Want to dive into when you and I talked the first time a couple months ago, the conversation about your college experience. And I want to be careful not to talk about anything that you're not comfortable with, but I told you a little bit about my wife's experience and kind of why I got involved in coaching women's athletics after coaching men for 11 years was sort of this performance anxiety is what we had named it. And my wife she wasn't my wife at the time, but we were talking and she was telling me that she wanted to get hurt, get injured, get into a car accident, get into something that didn't force her to go back to practice. She didn't want to die. She just didn't want to go to practice and deal with what she was dealing with anymore. Yeah. And then I started hearing this over and over and over again from female athletes mostly. I've heard it from some male athletes too, but female athletes mostly. And when I was talking to you about this, it kind of resonated with you. So feel free to kind of give your college experience in a way that makes sense to you.
Yeah, yeah. So, like I said earlier, I played basketball and softball throughout my high school career, and I actually had a really hard time deciding which one I was going to play. And ended up, I think I was physically better at softball, but basketball was such a unique challenge. And I'm 5'11", so I was like, I was tall. I want to do this. It was such a good challenge for me, and I've always been more eager to go after a challenging situation, and kind of how my parents raised us. And so I chose basketball, and I actually went to college and played basketball my freshman year. And to say it was a challenging year would be not even close to what it was, from both a physical and a mental standpoint. And at this point, I had zero mental performance training, didn't even know that sports psychology was a thing. So it was really mostly physical. But I worked my tail off. I was like the hardest worker. I've always been a hard worker. I gained like 18 pounds of muscle my freshman year, because one of the strength coaches told me I looked like a cross country runner because I was just the tall, skinny, which like I was, hindsight 2020, love that. But like, I like changed my whole body, like, right. I was eating so much and all these things, and trying to become the best player I could. And like, I was still a little thin. So, and I was like 5'11". So I was like in between like shooting guard and a forward. And so I was playing the three, and I just wasn't good enough, honestly. And like everything I had done, it wasn't enough. Like there were people on our team who was better than me. And not to get into too nitty gritty of all of it, but it was incredibly challenging. And I didn't think the coaching staff at the time was, really willing to work with me a ton. And they were kind of just like, like run me into the ground, didn't really care about me off the court. And I think I took 18 hours my freshman year, first and second semester, got all A's, and everything I was doing was right in my book, right? From a work ethic standpoint on the court to a work standpoint off the court. Like I was doing everything right. And it just didn't seem to matter. And they were honestly pretty disrespectful, if I'm being really honest, to me and my career and what I was bringing to the table. And it ended up being a really, really, really bad fit. And it just kind of sucked from both angles. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Right. And like, we had our year in meeting. It wasn't great. Like, I didn't think they were pumped. I wasn't pumped. And so I did not know what to do. And I remember calling my parents, bawling my eyes out, right? You have this vision on what you think it's going to look like and how amazing it's going to be. And you go chase your dream. And then it's just like you run straight into a brick wall, like as fast as you possibly can. And so I had to figure out what I was going to do. So the options were, do I go play basketball somewhere else, maybe at a D2? Do I stay at school and just not play any sports and just go to school? And I was like, that's almost not an option for me, because for whatever, I guess almost 20 years, right, I had played sports. And then the last idea came into my head was I had actually talked at the university I was at to the softball coach before I had gotten there. And just had talked about opportunities. And I knew I didn't want to go and play two sports at the same time, especially basketball and softball, because they're very different training, right? Like softball, we're squatting the house, right? Basketball, we're conditioning the house, right? And so like throw up until you're running till you throw up. And so anyway, I went and
you shouldn't be running till you throw up, by the way. I want to put that out there.
Yes, we were. That was part of it. And like pushing plates on the ground till you throw. Oh yeah, good times. And so then I went and actually sat down and had a conversation with the softball coach at the same university. And I was like, here's my story. Like, I'm the hardest worker in the world. I would love to switch sports, which like is kind of unheard of. Like, what? And after an amazing conversation, he was like, we don't have any spots for this coming year, but if you want to come be around the team and like start getting your reps in, getting your work in, you technically won't be on the roster my sophomore year. But if you want to come help and do stuff on the team. So I actually was helping as like an equipment manager while taking reps, right? So like not during practice, because I couldn't, NCAA rules, whatever. And so I was taking reps and stuff after practice, before practice. I was in the gym doing their exact same workouts, but on my own, for a whole year, basically transitioning from basketball to softball. And then my junior and senior year, I played softball, and I was one of the captains on the team my senior year, and ended up playing. And again, I wasn't like the best on the team by any means. I felt like I was really good at both, but not unbelievable at either. Had I have maybe honed in a little earlier, like that's probably one of my biggest regrets. But at the same time, I didn't know, and everything kind of was a ripple effect from that. But ended up finishing my career there and had amazing basketball friends and amazing softball friends, and kind of blended those two worlds together. And we would, hang out together, and it actually is pretty unbelievable. I had basketball teammates at my wedding, softball teammates at my wedding. It was just, and I married a football player. So the football team, so our whole wedding was a huge reunion. But it ended up being amazing, but really unique course. And then of course I took a sport and performance psychology class my senior year, fell in love with it, started bringing techniques back to the team when I was one of the captains, then went to grad school and was still coming back and bringing them to the coach. And lo and behold, my first internship in sport and performance psychology was Major League Baseball. And I'm not sure I would have gotten that opportunity without my softball coach, because he gave an unbelievable recommendation. He was like, you'd be dumb not to hire her. And I was like, wow, thank you. But also too, if I didn't have softball on my resume, at the time I didn't know why all those things were happening. And I was crushed. I remember sitting outside one of our dorm rooms on like a little air vent with one of my roommates, just bawling my eyes out. Like, I'm like, what's happening? I didn't think this is how it's supposed to be. And it was nothing like I thought it was going to be. But I think looking back now, it was better than I could have ever imagined. But in the heat of the moment, it was probably the biggest challenge I've ever faced with, and how I was treated as a human from the basketball perspective was so awful. And I remember, and I say it every day, all the time. And my mom reminds me all the time. She's like, had you not have gone through that, I don't know if you would be able to handle some of the stuff that was thrown at you today. And like, I work predominantly, professional sports, male sports. And so I'm like, bring it on. Like anything you guys say. And I had a little brother, and I was like, nothing you guys can say is going to be worse than like how my brother and I treated each other, in a joking, loving way. But like, because I went through all those hardships and that incredibly difficult, challenging, people questioning who I was as a human, not just as an athlete, right? Which I take great pride in who I am as a human being. Like, athlete's one thing, right? But who you are as a human, right? When people start questioning that, you start really digging deep, and those things hurt. And looking back on it now, it's kind of funny. Long story short, I was with the Texas Rangers when we went to the World Series, and one of those coaches actually reached out to somebody and tried to get them tickets to the World Series games. And I was like, my, oh my, how it all comes full circle. And like, I was never ugly. I was never like broke any of those bridges, even though maybe I wanted to burn them down, and I didn't. And it was just like kind of funny how it comes full circle. But in the heat of the moment, it was like probably some of the darkest days, right, of my playing career, if not the darkest days of my playing career. But looking back now, it's definitely made me who I was.
Well, you made lemonade out of lemons, right? Like you got pretty lucky, and
For sure.
and obviously luck is oftentimes wrapped up in a really ugly package that looks like hard work and all sorts of adversity.
No doubt.
But the thing that, just hearing your experience and hearing so many like them, the word that you kept saying is, I'm a human, right? And I think quite often in coaching, it's high stress, and if you don't win, you're going to get fired. And there's a lot of that at any level. I mean, it ratchets up the higher level you go, but just really remembering that the people that you're coaching are humans, and they have feelings, and they have self-worth, that you are trying to get them to believe that they are the best version of themselves. And if that training that can go into helping people do that is missed oftentimes along the way, unless young coaches just get a great mentor that model that for them. Right. And your experience is far more common than it should be. Yeah. And I really appreciate you sharing. You were in a bad situation, and you made it work out. And there's a lot of people that don't have the opportunity to have a second sport or have a happy ending with athletics, and just have a bad ending to it. So coaches, if you're listening, treat your people like they're your kids, and they're humans, and they feel things, and you want them to feel good about themselves. Not that you can't correct people, but there's a way to do that doesn't make them feel bad about who they are as individuals. So thank you for sharing that piece. Then you brought up, you got into sports psychology. Yeah. We're going to do another episode with you on kind of the meat and potatoes of sports psychology and mental performance, but the kind of, just give us a brief background for people who listen to the next show, kind of what your path was, your trajectory from college into where you are now.
Yeah. So, like I said, I took a elective course my senior year. I had no clue what I wanted to do, right? Again, being in sports, I knew I wanted to stay in sports. I thought I was going to be a coach for a while. I thought I was going to be maybe even a strength and conditioning coach. And I actually did an internship and was like, I don't know if this is for me. I love to work out, but I didn't really necessarily love coaching it. And then my mom actually is a clinical psychologist. And so she was always psyching us up, like from a clinical standpoint. And I knew I didn't want to work with just like normal humans. I wanted to work with elite humans and people who want to be the best that they can possibly be. And so I took an elective in sports psych and had an incredible professor, Dr. Howard Baptiste, and she helped me fall in love with it. And then I realized you could go to grad school. So I went up the road to Knoxville at University of Tennessee and got my master's degree there. And then did an internship while I was there at an international junior golf academy in Hilton Head, South Carolina. And then as soon as I graduated, I did an internship with the Pittsburgh Pirates in Bradenton, Florida. So another piece is like, right, you moved to Knoxville, then I moved to Hilton Head, then I moved back to Knoxville, then I moved to Florida. And then from Florida, after my first internship, I went and worked with a private practice in New York City. So I worked in New York City for a year and a half. And then I went and worked for the Phillies for 4 years, but that was in Florida. So I lived in Florida for a year. Then moved in, got married, moved to Tennessee back with my husband. And this was the point where I was on the road for about 25 days a month during season, which was crazy. I did that for about 6 years, 4 with the Phillies and 2 with the Texas Rangers. And then spent the year with the Texas Rangers. And then last year was the first year. And I decided, we wanted a family and we were trying to figure out how to make all this work. And obviously it's hard to have kids and raise kids when you're gone 25 days out of the month, 10 months out of the year. So we had to make some pretty hard life decisions. But so far it's been a great decision. I have individual clients now. I do speaking events all over the world from Australia to New York. And actually I'm consulting with a professional hockey team right now.
Oh, cool.
So it's kind of cool how you can kind of find and figure out how to make it the best of both worlds. And that was my goal, is to be able to be a mom, an awesome mom, but also still do the thing that I love so much and who's a huge part of me, right? That was one of the reasons we kind of put off having kids for a little bit, because I didn't want to lose who I was and my identity of a mental performance coach. And so working to find that balance has been a great challenge that I've sometimes have been told you couldn't do. And I'm like, no, we're going to figure out how to do this. So that's my path.
What, just real quick, I think you have a World Series ring. Didn't you win a World Series? How was that? Like that, there's not very many people that win a world championship as part of an organization. That had to be amazing.
It was absolutely amazing. And I did a post somewhere on my social media on the ring and everything, and like the 10 characteristics that it takes to win a World Series as a part of an organization. But from day one, we were talking about a World Series, right? Day one. And I know a lot of teams do that, but it was like, from day one, that organization was talking about it, and you watch it because there were highs and lows. It wasn't a perfect season. It wasn't even close to a perfect season, right? You have highs and lows, and you kind of peak at the right time and you get the right pieces. And, but it was pretty unbelievable. I mean, just to watch it and you're like, wait, this could actually happen. Wait, this might happen. Wait, this is happening. Holy, it happened. And that was everybody's reaction, right? Like even the people who are emotionless and never show emotions were like, throwing helmets and so happy. And I mean, it's something you work so hard for and you talk about and everybody talks about it. And then to actually do it, it's like so surreal. And then the next day it's like, all right, back at it again.
Well, that's amazing. Well, we're going to have you back for a second episode to get into the meat and potatoes of mental performance. But I really want, your story is so fascinating and you have so much to bring. I wanted to make sure that we cover your life before we dive into that. I do this with everybody. So I warned you beforehand. We're going to do a crystal ball and we're going to do a dad joke. So the crystal ball thing is I had my players when I was coaching, write me a paper, creating a crystal ball for their future so that we could have a template to build their life, get them the right degree, all the things. And what I'm going to ask you is to take a reverse crystal ball to when you were 10. You got involved in sports, you got involved in athletics. And what would today's Hannah tell 10-year-old Hannah, knowing everything that you know now?
Relax and have a good time, girl. Like, cause I was always so serious and like wanted to win. And like, I think it's maybe, hey, if you really want to win, go have fun. Like that's how you win. Like you win, the more fun you have, the better you're going to be. and just go have fun, because I think sometimes I took it a little too seriously. But I've always was like the leader and the one hyping us up, and I've just always been good at pep talks. Shout out to my mom for that probably, but yeah, I would say just freaking have fun, like loosen up a little bit. It's okay. It's okay.
That's great advice. Freaking have fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
freaking have fun. That's good advice
Yeah.
for a 10-year-old. All right, last thing here. Give me your best dad joke.
Okay. Okay. What do you call a deer with no eyes?
What do you call a deer with no eyes?
I have no idea.
You
Oh,
can't see my producer. I can see him in the background, and he's laughing his you know what off and
that's so
clapping.
brutal.
It's so good. All right. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show. We're going to interview you again, and as I said, have a conversation about mental performance. Appreciate you sharing your story with us.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed the conversation. And behalf of my producer Jason, thanks a ton for being a part of this. We'll talk to you all soon.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Thank you.